Picture a gleaming mansion perched on a hill, its marble columns shining in the afternoon sun. Within these luxurious walls resides a man who once held the world in his hands, handsome, wealthy, and worshipped by many. But beneath the polished veneer lies a dark secret. He callously abandoned his pregnant wife for a seductive new lover, trading genuine love for the thrill of infatuation. Years later, when fate's wheels spun full circle, life delivered a brutal lesson. Stripped of power and desperate for forgiveness, he fell to his knees, begging for the mercy he once so cruelly withheld. This is his extraordinary tale. They say everything that glitters isn't gold, and that truth rang loud and clear in the opulent world of Ethan Cole. Ethan was born into an ordinary family in a small town in upstate New York. His early years were modest, shared with two younger sisters and a mother who worked double shifts at the local diner. His father had passed away when Ethan was just 9, leaving an emotional void that would follow him for years. Ethan vowed to change his destiny, to never again feel powerless or insignificant in a world that demanded influence and wealth. Propelled by a brilliant mind and an insatiable appetite for success, Ethan worked tirelessly. He excelled at school, won scholarships, earned early acceptance to a prestigious business program at Columbia University, and immersed himself in the bustle of Manhattan. It was there that he first felt the heady rush of power. Students scrambled to partner with him for projects. Professors gave him glowing references, and recruiters from Wall Street came calling. Ethan thrived on recognition, forging a new identity not as the boy from a modest background, but as the man who would conquer boardrooms and penthouses alike. By his final year at Columbia, Ethan had interned with a reputable real estate firm. He displayed a knack for reading market trends that impressed even the most seasoned brokers. One such broker, Arthur Vance, recognized Ethan's talent and took him under his wing. Arthur introduced him to high-end property moguls at lavish parties around Manhattan. These events were hosted at some of the city's finest locations, signature banquets at the Waldorf Astoria and charity galas at Rockefeller Center. It was at these glittering gatherings that Ethan cultivated not only an unmatched confidence, but also a sense that nothing was ever enough. At one of these elaborate dinners, in a swirl of tuxedos and champagne flutes, he met Olivia Miller, a gentle soul from a humble background, much like his own. She was a public relations intern, assigned to oversee the event's guest list. She carried no pretenses. Instead, she possessed a down-to-earth charm that drew him in. Her eyes flickered with an empathetic warmth he found strangely irresistible. Intrigued by her kindness and disarmed by her honesty, Ethan found in Olivia a reflection of the person he used to be. Soon, they grew close. Ethan's relentless ambition coexisted with a true fondness for Olivia. He fell in love with her generosity, her unwavering moral compass, and the way she looked at him as though he was the kindest man on earth, even though deep down, he knew he was far from perfect. The romance between Ethan and Olivia blossomed amidst the frenetic pace of Manhattan. Their relationship thrived on stolen moments amid busy schedules. Ethan rose quickly at the real estate firm, securing deals worth millions by the time he was 27. During the day, he navigated skyscrapers and serious business negotiations. In the evenings, he and Olivia retreated into a world of simple joys, paper-thin pizza slices in their cramped apartment, quiet walks through Central Park, or nights spent reading aloud from the New York Times. dreaming of a life they might one day build. Despite his mounting successes, Ethan's old insecurities lingered. Each time he closed a deal, it felt like a temporary salve to the hurt that festered from his poverty-stricken childhood. But that hunger for more, that need to be recognized and revered, only grew stronger. Sometimes Olivia would notice him staring out the apartment window at the city lights with a longing that went beyond anything material. She didn't push him, though. She believed that his drive, while intense, came from a desire to secure their future and ensure they never faced hardship. It was during this period that Ethan made a colossal breakthrough. A billionaire property tycoon, Reginald Sterling, entrusted him with brokering a complicated international acquisition. If successful, the commission would catapult Ethan into the financial stratosphere. He spent restless weeks juggling midnight conference calls with overseas investors, forging alliances, and strategizing with cunning precision. Sometimes Olivia would find him passed out on the living room couch, files strewn across the coffee table, laptop perched precariously on one knee. She'd quietly cover him with a blanket and remove his glasses, worried about how hard he was pushing himself. When the deal finally closed, it was a triumph that made headlines in various finance publications. Ethan's name was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal for his ingenuity and vision. The company gave him a performance bonus that dwarfed his entire previous year's salary. With that newfound wealth, he decided to propose to Olivia in a grand gesture fit for the realm of his ambitions. He rented a suite at the Plaza Hotel overlooking Central Park, decorated it with her favorite lilies, and spelled out, "Will you marry me?" in rose petals on the floor. Olivia, overwhelmed, said yes without hesitation. Tears stained her cheeks as she realized everything they had dreamed of might actually be within reach. That night, they toasted with champagne, their future shining bright, almost too bright to look at directly. In the months following their engagement, Ethan poured even more energy into business deals, determined to give Olivia the life he believed she deserved. He promised her an elegant wedding, a dream home, and comfort beyond her wildest imagination. She, in turn, threw herself into wedding preparations, carefully selecting every detail from flower arrangements to seating charts. Their shared delight carried them through exhausting days. But beneath it all, a subtle shift was happening in Ethan. As investors and society elites began to court his expertise, he felt intoxicated by his own power, the lure of wealth, status, and the admiration of the upper echelons began to overshadow the humility that once endeared him to Olivia. Though still loving, he was starting to drift, just a little enough that Olivia barely noticed. The wedding was a spectacle of glamour and genuine love. Their families and friends gathered in a picturesque vineyard in the Hudson Valley. White tents billowed gracefully in the soft summer breeze. Through tears of joy, Olivia walked down the aisle in a simple lace gown, clutching a bouquet of lilies, her late mother's favorite flower. Ethan looked handsome in his tailored suit, his demeanor a blend of pride and genuine awe at the woman he was marrying. Vows were exchanged under a floral arch. Promises of devotion, loyalty, and partnership spilled from their lips. Guests dabbed at their eyes with embroidered handkerchiefs as the bride and groom sealed their union with a kiss. Olivia thought she had never been so happy, nor had she seen Ethan look so at peace. Amid the congratulations, the photographs, and the swirling chatter of well-wishers, the newlyweds danced their first dance to a soft piano melody. They laughed at the gentle teasing of relatives who urged them to start a family soon. But for the moment, children were the last thing on Ethan's mind. He was still riding the wave of professional triumph, while Olivia mostly cared about building a home filled with warmth. Ethan had visions of building an empire, vast properties across continents, an investment portfolio that could withstand any economic quake, and a reputation that soared among the most elite circles. He wanted the Hamptons mansion, the private jets, the membership to exclusive clubs. The depth of his ambition was boundless, and in the back of his mind, a fleeting thought whispered that if he didn't seize every opportunity, he'd slip back into the struggling boy he once was. Months turned into a year of marital bliss. Olivia discovered she was pregnant soon after their first anniversary. The excitement in her eyes was unmatched. She saw in the child a natural next step, a symbol of the life and love they were building. Nervous but elated, she shared the news with Ethan one crisp morning as they ate breakfast at the marble countertop in their brand-new penthouse overlooking the East River. Ethan's face broke into a cautious smile. He hugged her, but his eyes flickered with something unreadable. His career was skyrocketing, leaving him juggling meetings, travel, and negotiations at all hours. On the outside, he seemed thrilled, but he also recognized the immense responsibility looming. In private moments, he worried about whether a child would slow him down or hamper his pursuit of the next big deal. Guilt tugged at him whenever he felt even a spark of resentment toward the pregnancy. Yet he reassured himself that love would conquer all once the baby arrived. After all, he had promised Olivia forever. As her belly grew, Olivia shone with maternal radiance. She decorated a nursery, carefully choosing calming pastel colors and plush toys from well-known brands, including a cuddly teddy bear from Build-A-Bear Workshop. She wanted a real, heartfelt gesture for their first child. She also insisted on attending prenatal checkups, taking birthing classes, and reading countless books on motherhood. Ethan sometimes accompanied her, but more and more, his phone buzzed with urgent calls or texts from potential investors. Their conversations increasingly revolved around money, expansion, and the unstoppable trajectory of his professional endeavors. Olivia quietly observed how his once gentle spirit had turned restless, as if he believed that love and family were hindrances on his road to unbridled success. By the time Olivia was 7 months pregnant, Ethan was firmly entrenched in high society. Invitations to lavish galas, cocktails at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and nights in exclusive clubs became the norm. He found himself rubbing shoulders with celebrities, major real estate developers, and even foreign dignitaries. At these events, he was no longer the eager small-town boy. He was the star, the man with the Midas touch who could finalize deals worth billions. It was at one such high-profile charity event for cancer research at the Mandarin Oriental in Columbus Circle that Ethan's path crossed with Victoria Sinclair, a striking socialite whose father owned a massive media conglomerate. Victoria was everything society deemed alluring: tall, poised, magnetic. She possessed a confidence that, instead of being cultivated, seemed to exude from her every pore. Known for her luxurious lifestyle, from traveling on family-owned private jets to flaunting rare jewelry, Victoria created a stir wherever she appeared. The moment Ethan laid eyes on her that evening, curiosity and fascination stirred within him. He knew the significance of her father's influence. how forging connections with the Sinclairs could accelerate his career beyond even his wildest dreams. As they chatted over cocktails, he found himself captivated by her wit, her audacious stories of extravagant European vacations, and her easy ability to navigate the social elite. Victoria seemed to share Ethan's thirst for bigger, bolder conquests in life, unbothered by moral constraints. When she discovered Ethan was married with a baby on the way, Victoria initially feigned surprise but then laughed it off, remarking that wealthy men never truly belong to anyone except their ambitions. An unsettling spark passed between them, fueled by curiosity, vanity, and the rush of playing with forbidden desire. Ethan was simultaneously flattered and uneasy, yet he didn't pull away. The old insecurities reared up again, whispering that he needed to secure every advantage, both financial and social, to remain on top. Victoria, the media mogul's daughter, represented a direct route to more power. Ethan told himself it was harmless flirting, an act of networking. Yet, as the weeks passed, text messages and phone calls with Victoria became more frequent. They met under the guise of discussing potential business partnerships, though the discussions often took place over flirtatious dinners. Guilt rippled through Ethan occasionally. He knew Olivia was at home, heavily pregnant, waiting for him. He promised himself he would never go too far, but lines have a way of blurring when money and desire collide. Meanwhile, Olivia tried to be understanding. She believed Ethan was simply working to secure their family's future. She didn't push him too hard to come home earlier or attend every prenatal class. In her mind, love meant supporting her husband's dreams. And while she missed him terribly, she assumed his distance was simply due to the demands of his job. Never in her darkest nightmares could she have imagined that another woman was intentionally inserting herself into their marriage. The affair was a slow burn. At first, it was sporadic texts and secret glances across crowded rooms. Victoria would playfully place her hand on Ethan's arm during philanthropic luncheons or real estate conferences. He told himself these were fleeting moments of excitement, nothing more than a game. And yet, each time they interacted, the tension between them grew thicker. Ethan came up with rationalizations to ease his conscience. Forging an alliance with Victoria's father's media empire could give him unprecedented coverage and access in the real estate world. And if he had to indulge a little flirting, what was the harm? Still, there were nights he lay beside Olivia, listening to her soft breathing as she fell asleep, and felt a sharp pang of remorse. But that remorse never fully outweighed the seductive allure of power and the magnetism Victoria exuded. By Olivia's 8th month of pregnancy, her physical discomfort intensified. She battled swollen ankles, persistent heartburn, and a constant ache in her back. Ethan, engrossed in his double life, became increasingly irritated by her needs. He felt burdened whenever she asked him to accompany her to a doctor's appointment or to help assemble the crib. Eventually, Olivia, wanting to maintain peace, minimized her requests. She believed things would return to normal after the baby was born, that Ethan would refocus on their family once the demands of his biggest deals eased. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan was attending a lavish birthday celebration for Victoria's father at a private club near Fifth Avenue. The press was there, photographing the city's social glitterati. Victoria appeared in a shimmering black gown that clung to her every curve. And when she saw Ethan, she sauntered over, pressing close in a way that left no room for misinterpretation. His heart pounded with a mix of guilt, attraction, and the undeniable thrill of dancing on a precipice. As the evening wore on, the music and alcohol lulled him into a haze. Victoria led Ethan to a secluded upper lounge, away from prying eyes. In that shadowy alcove, the tension that had crackled between them for months finally broke. They kissed an illicit, electric moment that neither could deny. Guilt thundered in Ethan's head, even as he kissed her back, consumed by a toxic mix of desire and justification. By the time he left the party, his mind was tangled. He tried to reason that it was just one mistake, one lapse, but deep down, he knew he had set a dangerous precedent. The next morning, an unsuspecting Olivia asked him to feel the baby kicking. As he placed his hand on her swollen abdomen, a wave of guilt almost made his knees buckle. He forced a smile, pressing a kiss to her temple, vowing silently to end the madness with Victoria. In that moment, he decided that whatever short-lived thrill he had felt was not worth jeopardizing everything he had built with Olivia. But fate, or perhaps the darker corners of his own psyche, had a different plan. Ethan tried to distance himself from Victoria, though it proved more complicated than he anticipated. She was not merely a fling. Her family's media empire was entangled with some of his biggest business prospects. To sever ties abruptly risked both social fallout and the destruction of valuable alliances. Still, Ethan determined he'd keep the relationship strictly professional. Victoria had other ideas. One evening, she called Ethan late, sounding distraught. She claimed to have discovered alarming issues with her father's company finances, documents pointing to potential fraud by some of their European partners. Terrified her father would be implicated in a scandal, she begged Ethan to help her decipher the real estate connections. Worried about the consequences of ignoring her, and perhaps still enticed by her vulnerability, he agreed to meet her at her penthouse. Once inside her sumptuous apartment, she handed him a stack of papers. The conversation began with business concerns, but it soon drifted into personal territory. Victoria confessed that her persona was largely a facade. Underneath the polished exterior, she felt lonely, trapped in a world where genuine relationships were scarce, replaced by transactions and favors. Ethan listened, surprising himself by feeling empathy. When Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, tears slipping down her cheeks, he placed a comforting arm around her. One moment of solace turned into another kiss. That night, Ethan tumbled deeper into an affair that wasn't merely physical. It was emotional as well. Victoria represented a world that thrilled him, a world unburdened by the demands of pending fatherhood, a world that praised him for his financial cunning rather than expecting unconditional support. He felt guilty for resenting Olivia's needs, but he couldn't ignore the thrill that surged each time he was near Victoria. Their entanglement intensified. Meanwhile, Olivia entered her final month of pregnancy. She noticed that Ethan stayed out late more often, claiming business emergencies. Her suspicion grew, but she pushed it down, attributing everything to his demanding career. She consoled herself that his financial success would provide a secure life for their child. Still, she was lonely. In her quieter moments, she worried about her marriage. Yet she trusted Ethan more than she trusted her own fears. Then came the day Olivia went into early labor. It was 2 weeks before her due date, and she was alone in the apartment when sharp pains radiated across her abdomen. Panicking, she tried calling Ethan repeatedly, only to be met with voicemail. In desperation, she called a taxi and headed to the hospital. Ethan, meanwhile, was in the throes of passion with Victoria in a boutique hotel when he saw his phone lighting up. Initially, he ignored it, but something about the repeated calls unsettled him. When he finally picked up, he heard Olivia's trembling voice. She was crying, breath short, saying she needed him. In a flash, the reality of his life crashed down, overshadowing the allure of Victoria's bedroom. He dressed hastily, apologizing to Victoria before he raced out, feeling like a man caught between two worlds, one of genuine love and responsibility, the other of reckless ambition and lust. Ethan arrived at the hospital just as doctors were prepping Olivia for a complicated delivery. She was pale, sweating, and exhausted from her contractions. Relief flooded her face when she saw him in the doorway. He rushed to her side, gripping her hand as tears filled his eyes. At that moment, he realized he genuinely loved her, that she had always been his anchor, no matter how far he strayed. The delivery was long and strenuous. Olivia's blood pressure rose dangerously. Ethan watched in horror as doctors and nurses swarmed around her, calling out medical instructions. He stayed by her side, whispering words of encouragement. Finally, after hours of labor, they heard the fragile cry of a baby boy. The doctors laid the tiny infant in Olivia's arms. In that instant, a powerful wave of emotion washed over Ethan. He was no longer just an ambitious real estate mogul. He was a father, but the bliss was short-lived. Olivia's condition took a turn for the worse. She hemorrhaged and required an emergency procedure. Ethan was pushed out of the operating room, forced to pace the hallway in a cold sweat. Never had he felt so helpless, so terrified. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not the money, not the prestige, not even Victoria. He prayed fervently that Olivia would survive, that he hadn't chased wealth and status only to lose the one person who truly loved him without condition. After several harrowing hours, the doctors emerged to inform Ethan that they had managed to stop the bleeding, but Olivia would need blood transfusions and time in the ICU. Overwhelmed, Ethan nearly collapsed from relief. The next few days passed in a haze of hospital monitors and hushed conversations. The baby, healthy despite the ordeal, remained in the neonatal ward while Olivia recovered. During those days, Ethan had ample time to reflect, standing by Olivia's bedside, watching the machines that beeped and whirred around her. He realized with clarity how close he had come to losing everything. A gentle nurse placed the baby in his arms one evening, and Ethan felt the fragile weight of this new life. Guilt gnawed at him sharper than ever. He had strayed from his vows, from his principles, and for what? An intoxicating affair that brought momentary pleasure and the illusion of more power. When Olivia finally woke, she was weak but conscious. Her gaze locked onto Ethan, cradling their child, tears gathering in her eyes. She beckoned him closer, and he pressed a tender kiss on her forehead. For a few days, they shared a tentative peace, bound by this miraculous baby and the near-death experience. Ethan promised himself he would find a way to end things with Victoria once and for all. He owed it to Olivia, owed it to their son, to be the husband and father they deserved. Yet, as soon as the immediate crisis passed, Ethan found his phone flooded with messages from Victoria. She demanded to know why he had left so abruptly, pressed him about a real estate deal they were collaborating on, and teased him with provocative photos that reignited desires. The magnetic pull of that forbidden world was still there, tempting him at his weakest moments. With Olivia still in recovery, Ethan rationalized that ignoring Victoria might cause professional fallout he couldn't afford. So he told himself he'd respond just to keep things smooth on the business front. He didn't realize how those small concessions were paving the path to an even deeper betrayal. As Olivia and the baby were discharged from the hospital, life at home underwent a seismic shift. The once quiet penthouse now rang with the baby's cries, the shuffle of diapers, and the smells of formula and antiseptic wipes. Parenthood was exhausting, beautiful, and chaotic all at once. Olivia, still recovering from her near-fatal delivery, struggled with postpartum pains and emotional turbulence. Ethan tried to be supportive, holding the baby so Olivia could rest, fetching her water when she was breastfeeding. Yet his patience was short-lived. Sleepless nights wore on him, and the weight of fatherhood began to clash with his thirst for professional and social triumph. Ethan found reasons, sometimes legitimate, sometimes contrived, to escape the domestic whirlwind: a late-night meeting with prospective investors, an urgent trip to finalize a property sale, or an invitation to a networking dinner that was too important to miss. On many of these evenings, he slipped back into Victoria's orbit. She offered a glamorous reprieve from dirty diapers and the piercing wail of a newborn at 3 a.m. At her penthouse, the lights were dim, the wine was chilled, and the conversation spun around luxurious holidays and million-dollar ventures. At first, he managed to keep up the facade that it was all business. But Victoria, like a skilled predator, sensed his vulnerability. She capitalized on his fatigue, frustration, and dissatisfaction at home. She reassured him that he deserved a carefree lifestyle commensurate with his growing fortune, that he shouldn't be chained down by fatherhood and household responsibilities. Each word she spoke fanned the embers of resentment that glowed faintly in his heart. Eventually, flirtation turned into nights spent together, and nights became weekends in which he claimed to be on business retreats. During this time, Olivia grew increasingly lonely. She was left with the baby most nights, barely sleeping, battling emotional highs and lows. When she approached Ethan about her concerns, he brushed them off or claimed she was just overtired. The tension between them escalated. Arguments flared over minor issues, bills, the baby's pediatrician appointments, even groceries. Olivia suspected something deeper was wrong, but she blamed herself for not being the radiant partner she once was. She told herself that once she fully recovered, once she could regain her old sense of self, Ethan would return to her in mind and spirit. But even though Olivia tried to fix things, the rift only widened. Unanswered calls, messages that Ethan claimed he didn't see, and overnight stays at hotels for client meetings became the new normal. Yet Ethan's bank account swelled, and the luxuries poured in: expensive suits, a new sports car, invitations to the most exclusive country clubs. He used real names like Forbes, telling Olivia he was on the cusp of a feature about young moguls to watch. And it wasn't an exaggeration. Forbes really did want to interview him about his remarkable ascent in the real estate world. That fleeting sense of guilt still lingered whenever he saw his infant son or caught Olivia's worried gaze. But he convinced himself it was a necessary sacrifice. After all, it was just a matter of time before he found the perfect way to manage both worlds. Little did he know, his house of cards was on the brink of collapse. The final push in a moral freefall came one night when Victoria openly propositioned Ethan to leave Olivia and pursue a life with her instead. They were on the terrace of an exclusive penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline. The hush of nighttime Manhattan was broken only by the hum of traffic below. Victoria, dressed in a sleek gown, leaned in, her gaze piercing his. "You and I are unstoppable together," she said, her voice low and confident. "And you don't have to play the role of devoted husband anymore. Think of the business expansions, the media clout. We could conquer entire markets. I'll introduce you to the biggest names in Europe, Asia, anywhere you want to go." Ethan felt a surge of excitement and terror. He tried to deny the notion. Leaving Olivia felt unthinkable. She was the woman who had stood by him through all the ups and downs. She was the mother of his child. But at that exact moment, an image of a sleepless night at home flashed in his mind. The baby screaming, Olivia looking frazzled, dark circles under her eyes. The mundane reality of 2 a.m. Feedings. And here on this terrace was a vision of opulence, a pathway to global fame and unlimited riches. Before he knew it, he found himself nodding, the words tumbling out with cold detachment. He told Victoria he needed time. He had to figure out the logistics, the financial arrangements, and how to handle the inevitable scandal. Within a week, Ethan had a confrontation with Olivia that shattered her world. He came home late, reeking of perfume that wasn't hers. She didn't scream or cry. Her voice was eerily calm as she asked if he was having an affair. Ethan, cornered by guilt and adrenaline, admitted the truth. He insisted he was tired of the arguments, tired of the monotony, claiming he'd fallen out of love. The words came out so callously that even he was taken aback. Olivia's eyes, already brimming with tears, clouded with disbelief and devastation. She pleaded with him, reminding him of their vows, the baby who needed both parents. But Ethan, riding a wave of emotional numbness, declared he was leaving. He said he'd make sure she and the baby were taken care of financially. But he no longer wanted this life. He didn't want to wake up to the smell of formula and the relentless demands of fatherhood. It was a moment that encapsulated his complete moral collapse, a betrayal that spat in the face of loyalty, compassion, and integrity. He left her standing in the living room, tears streaming down her face, clutching the baby in trembling arms. She begged him to reconsider, but he just walked out, the door slamming behind him like the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. In the days that followed, Ethan initiated divorce proceedings, listing irreconcilable differences. His lawyers swarmed over the penthouse, enumerating assets and liabilities. Olivia was given some money, which Ethan deemed more than fair, though it hardly compensated for her shattered heart and the sense of abandonment she felt for her child. The tabloids got wind of the scandal, though at first it was hushed by Victoria's father's media influence. For the moment, Ethan thought he had severed the past and stepped into a shining new future. He had no inkling of the karma that waited patiently to settle the score. In the immediate months following the split, Ethan reveled in his newfound freedom. He moved into a luxurious suite in one of Manhattan's most prestigious addresses, a place that soared high above the hustle of the city. He took Victoria on extravagant trips across Europe, staying at five-star hotels in Paris, Monaco, and Venice. Photographers captured them attending high-profile social events, sipping champagne while dressed in designer attire. Victoria delighted in being the center of attention, and Ethan seemed eager to share the spotlight. Yet, as he settled into this life of unbridled opulence, There were subtle signs that not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Victoria, though cunning and influential, was also capricious. She turned moody when she didn't get her way, throwing temper tantrums that bordered on childish. She demanded constant displays of affection and generosity, expecting lavish gifts and exclusive experiences. Ethan obliged, rationalizing that it was the price he paid for being with a woman whose father could open endless doors. After all, wasn't this the life he had always yearned for? A life of infinite wealth, minimal responsibilities, and global recognition? Behind the scenes, Ethan also noticed changes in his business dealings. Some of the old networks he'd built with close colleagues started to fracture once news of his affair and abandonment spread quietly through the industry. While Victoria's father shielded them from extensive media criticism, the real estate world was a smaller circle than one might think. Certain partners raised questions about Ethan's trustworthiness. A few deals fell through, citing unforeseen complications, though he suspected it was due to a tarnished reputation. It seemed that not everyone admired a man who would betray his wife and newborn child. Then came a disturbing development. Victoria's father's media conglomerate began facing allegations of unethical practices, everything from inflated marketing numbers to quiet briberies of government officials overseas. Ethan found himself entangled in the crossfire when he was publicly identified as a close associate. Even though he had no direct involvement in the alleged corruption, the scandal cast a long shadow, sending shockwaves through his client base. Investors grew skittish, worried about negative publicity. At first, Ethan tried to downplay it, confident that Victoria's family could quash the issue with their usual influence. But the story gained traction, especially on platforms not controlled by Victoria's father. Soon, authorities launched a formal investigation. Stressed and overwhelmed, Ethan sought solace in Victoria, who dismissed his worries with a wave of her manicured hand. "Daddy has handled worse," she would say, applying lipstick in front of a gilded mirror. But Ethan sensed the shifting ground beneath his feet. He realized how deeply he had tethered himself to a family whose moral code matched, if not exceeded, his own questionable ethics. During this time, he occasionally spotted glimpses of Olivia on social media, holding their child, looking wearier but determined. Sometimes he felt a pang of regret, quickly smothered by the voice that insisted he had done the right thing for his future. He had left behind a burdensome existence, or so he convinced himself. Besides, with the massive settlement he had provided, Olivia and the baby were safe. He remained in denial about the emotional and psychological toll of his betrayal. But as the walls of scandal closed in, Ethan discovered that money alone could not shield him from consequences. Like a wildfire, rumors of Victoria's father's misdeeds spread, intensifying scrutiny on everyone in their circle. The perfect bubble Ethan had created began to show cracks, a dark omen of the bigger collapse on the horizon. The turning point came when federal investigators raided Victoria's father's corporate offices. Boxes of documents were seized, computers were forensically scanned, and a parade of executives were summoned for questioning. The once untouchable titan of media was now under the full glare of legal scrutiny, and everyone associated with the conglomerate felt the ripple effect. Victoria managed to keep her composure in public, but behind closed doors, she was furious and frightened. Her father's legal team began to circle the wagons, cutting deals where possible and throwing lower-level employees under the bus to protect the family name. Ethan, who had inked a variety of partnership agreements with Victoria's father, found himself on the investigation's periphery. In some transactions, he was listed as a co-investor. He had also helped broker real estate deals for the conglomerate overseas, while he had never knowingly engaged in illegal activities. Investigators wanted to determine if any of his deals were used to launder money or conceal assets. This threat of legal entanglement spooked Ethan's current investors, who began pulling out of projects, citing market uncertainties. Suddenly, Ethan's financial empire started to shrink. Real estate deals fell through. Banks, wary of negative publicity, reevaluated loan agreements and credit extensions. Lawsuits sprouted like mushrooms after a rainstorm, some legitimate, some opportunistic. The once shining star on the real estate stage now found himself struggling to keep afloat. The shift was swift, harsh, and terrifying. Victoria proved to be of little comfort. Busy defending her family's reputation, she spiraled into a vortex of panic and blame. When Ethan tried to discuss strategies to salvage his standing, she berated him for being too weak or afraid. She reminded him that without her father's influence, he would never have ascended to such dizzying heights. Their relationship, founded on lust and opportunism, began to corrode under the weight of stress, legal fees, and public scrutiny. Bit by bit, Ethan sold off assets to stay solvent. He parted with the sports cars, the penthouse, and even withdrew from some prestigious clubs. The swirl of rumors about his unethical conduct, some rooted in truth, others wildly exaggerated, spread through the real estate circles like wildfire. Key allies deserted him. Invitations to influential gatherings dried up, replaced by cold shoulders and polite evasions. Ethan was forced to reduce his lavish lifestyle, trading in the plush penthouse for a smaller, more discreet apartment. Through the chaos, he never once reached out to Olivia. A stubborn pride held him back. He assumed she despised him for what he had done and felt too ashamed to beg for her understanding. She was now a distant memory, a reminder of the life he had forsaken, a life that had once been grounded in love and loyalty. Then, as if orchestrated by fate, an even harsher blow fell. The real estate market softened in key regions, exacerbating Ethan's financial woes. Properties he had once counted on to boost his portfolio were sitting unsold. Money that once streamed in like a raging river dried to a trickle. For the first time since his meteoric rise, Ethan faced a very real possibility: bankruptcy. Desperate, he tried to resurrect deals, calling old contacts, visiting them unannounced, practically begging for partnerships. But no one wanted the tainted man who was under the suspicion of federal investigators, even though he was never charged with any crime. The stench of scandal lingered around him, and within that relentless downfall, he came to realize one brutal truth. He was alone, just as alone as he had left Olivia in that apartment with their newborn child. The final break with Victoria occurred when her father's legal case took a dramatic turn. Evidence emerged, implicating him in bribery and tax evasion across multiple countries. The family's assets were frozen pending the investigation, forcing them to shut down lavish vacation homes and cancel expensive memberships. Victoria, enraged by the humiliation, lashed out at Ethan for not doing enough to contain the damage. When he reminded her he was also on the brink of financial ruin, she turned icy. One evening, after an especially volatile argument, Victoria packed her designer suitcases and left, spewing insults about Ethan's failure to protect her family. He didn't stop her. Deep inside, he recognized the end of a relationship built on falsehoods and lust for power. The swift departure left him with an echoing emptiness, but also a strange sense of relief. Perhaps now he could confront the reality he had been avoiding. A couple of weeks later, as the corporate meltdown continued, Ethan attempted to salvage the remnants of his business. He consulted lawyers, accountants, and crisis managers, but the damage was too extensive. Clients were gone, contracts terminated, his reputation lay in ruins. Eventually, Ethan had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. The opulent life he once considered his birthright vanished in a flurry of auctions and repossessions. His fancy suits were sold off, the last of his expensive watches claimed by creditors. In the end, he was left with a modest sum that barely covered rent in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. He found himself in a surreal limbo. Once revered as a real estate genius, he was now scorned as a cautionary tale. No one returned his calls. The paparazzi, who once clamored for his photos at glamorous events, barely recognized him. And in the quiet hours of the night, as he stared at peeling paint on the walls of his new, humble residence, Ethan could only think of how he had ended up here. The puzzle pieces of his life, his family, his fortune, his pride were scattered and irreparable. During this period of reflection, his thoughts circled back to Olivia and their child. He had avoided any contact, fearing her contempt, but that gnawing regret in his chest had grown unbearable. He began to wonder about the baby he had abandoned, a son he had only held for a fleeting moment. Did he have his mother's gentle eyes? Was he learning to walk now? Had he spoken his first words, maybe mama, or even death, though Ethan had never been around? In a rare moment of clarity, Ethan realized the depth of his transgressions. He felt a compulsion, a moral imperative to seek forgiveness, though he knew he might never receive it. Summoning his courage, he decided to find Olivia. The weight of what he had done pressed heavily on him. He no longer had a fancy car or personal driver, so he took a train to the smaller neighborhood where Olivia now lived, guided only by an address he had gleaned from a friend of hers who pitied him. Standing outside a modest apartment building, Ethan hesitated, stomach churning. He felt undeserving of even seeing her face, let alone the child he had left behind. But he forced himself to climb the stairs and knock on her door. The hallway lights flickered with a dull hum, and for a moment, he wondered if she would slam the door in his face. Part of him hoped she would. But what he found when the door finally opened would change his life yet again. Olivia stood in the doorway, her son Ethan's son clutching her leg. The boy had curly dark hair and wide eyes that sparkled with curiosity. Olivia looked older, more worn, but there was a quiet strength in her posture. She regarded Ethan with a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, pity, perhaps. A tense silence filled the air until the little boy, sensing an unfamiliar presence, shrank behind his mother. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He tried to say something, to explain himself, but the words stuck. Olivia was the first to speak. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice thick with suppressed emotion. Thomas hesitated, tears already burning the corners of his eyes. He apologized, stumbling, disjointed phrases, repeating how sorry he was, how he had made terrible mistakes. He confessed his downfall, his regret, the emptiness of a life he had chased. Through it all, Olivia's gaze remained steady, tears threatening but unfallen. Finally, she allowed him inside, if only so they could talk where the neighbors wouldn't eavesdrop. Ethan sat on a worn couch, noting the tidy but modest apartment. Toys were neatly arranged in a corner, bright plastic reminders of the boys' presence. He saw pictures on the wall, Olivia holding their son at various ages, milestone photos of first birthday, a trip to the park, and in every one, Ethan was absent. He poured out a litany of remorse, telling her how karma had slammed into him. Olivia listened in silence until the story ended. When he was done, he bowed his head, tears dripping onto the cracked laminate floor. Then he fell to his knees in front of her, a broken supplicant, and begged for her forgiveness. He pleaded for a chance to be part of their son's life, a chance to mend what he had destroyed. His voice trembled with desperation. Olivia's expression shifted between anger and heartbreak. She had spent countless nights crying over this man, cursing his name, wondering what she had done to deserve such betrayal. She had raised their son alone, fighting postpartum depression and financial strain, all while healing from a near-fatal childbirth. In those quiet hours, she had imagined what she might do if he ever returned. Would she rage at him, slam the door? Would she spit in his face or allow him a sliver of redemption? After an agonizing pause, she told him he could be in their son's life if, and only if, he demonstrated genuine repentance. He would start as a visitor, meeting the child on weekends, and he would have to respect her boundaries. Nothing more, nothing less. If he abused her trust or hurt their son in any way, she'd shut him out permanently. The guarded hope in her eyes warred with deep-seated pain. Ethan wept, relieved for even this narrow avenue back into his child's life. He turned to the boy, who looked at him with tentative curiosity. Ethan tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked, "I'm sorry." He realized no apology could return the stolen moments, the fatherly guidance his son never received, or the nights Olivia cried herself to sleep. But in that moment, kneeling on the floor of her modest apartment, he silently vowed he would spend whatever remained of his life trying to make amends. Ethan's journey toward redemption was neither swift nor guaranteed. Initially, the child was wary of him, a stranger who appeared out of nowhere, looking disheveled and speaking softly. On those early visits, Ethan brought small gifts, though Olivia discouraged anything too extravagant. She wanted her son to build trust with his father through presence, not presents. So Ethan found himself squatting on the living room floor, stacking colorful building blocks, learning the names of cartoon characters he'd never heard of, and clapping enthusiastically when his son giggled for the first time in his presence. Financially, Ethan was still destitute. He took a job at a smaller real estate office, far from the glamour of Manhattan's elite. He started from scratch, assisting with rental listings and residential sales in middle-class neighborhoods, work he once would have scorned as beneath him. But he applied the same diligence and expertise that had once made him a millionaire. Except this time, he had a different motivation. Each humble paycheck went to covering his rent, child support, and the occasional extra for Olivia so she could give their son a better life. In the neighborhood, rumors circulated about the fallen real estate prodigy. Some recognized him and snickered. Others offered sympathetic nods. But for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't care about public opinion. His focus lay solely on rebuilding trust with his family, what remained of it, and carrying himself with honesty and humility, qualities he had cast aside for far too long. As the weeks and months passed, a fragile rapport formed between Ethan and Olivia. They navigated the complexities of co-parenting cautiously. Some days were rocky, filled with old hurts and misunderstandings. Other days, they found unexpected comfort in shared memories or the mutual joy of seeing their son achieve milestones. Like the first time he spoke a full sentence or managed to ride a small tricycle without falling. Little by little, Ethan's new employer recognized his skill set. Though he had tarnished his reputation in the larger sphere, within this smaller company, his experience was invaluable. He closed modest deals, mostly involving apartments and single-family homes. But each success felt more genuine and hard-earned than his previous multi-million-dollar transactions. He earned just enough to keep afloat. Yet the emptiness he once felt was gradually replaced by a sense of grounded satisfaction. One day, as he was leaving Olivia's place after a Sunday visit, she stopped him at the door. "I see you trying," she said quietly. "It doesn't erase what happened, and I'm not sure I can ever fully forgive you. But I can see you're trying to be there for our son. I appreciate that." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He nodded, managing only a whisper of "thank you." Over time, he came to accept that real forgiveness, if it ever came, would be measured in years, not months, and manifested in consistent actions rather than flowery words. And so, with each building block he stacked, each bedtime story he read, and each sincere apology, Ethan took one more step away from the hollow illusions of wealth and status he once craved. He discovered that true riches lay in the relationships we nurture, the love we freely give, and the integrity we uphold, even when no one else is watching. In time, he found a measure of peace, though the scars of his betrayal still lingered. He couldn't rewrite his past, but he could shape his present to ensure his son would never walk the same path. And in that conscious commitment, he found the redemptive power he had once thought only money could provide. Such is the story of Ethan Cole, a man who soared to obscene wealth at the cost of family and morals, only to crash under the weight of his own choices. Through heartache and humiliation, he discovered that life's greatest treasures cannot be purchased. They are earned through loyalty, humility, and unconditional love. In the end, kneeling at the doorway of the very home he had forsaken, he learned a lesson more valuable than all the millions he once held. True wealth is found in the hearts we protect and the hands we hold through every storm. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of ambition, betrayal, and redemption. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click lets us keep telling tales that remind us all of life's most profound truths. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to sharing more stories with you soon. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.